Hello friends and welcome back. As you can see, I've added a couple new things here in blue, and just like the last time, I thought I'd go ahead and do a pretty basic layout before we tackled anything, just so that I have a better idea as to what's going on, because the internals get very complicated and I don't want to be like fumbling around and wasting your time if you decide to watch this specific video. So obviously the next part that we're going to have to tackle is this I guess this kind of semicircle moon shape that sort of houses all the keys. So we have this guy. He himself isn't too complicated, and what's interesting is it actually connects back up to the circular pieces we had made before. This is where the belt feeds into. So this is all starting to really click together. I've kind of just very quickly broken down the different pieces. But there's a few other things that I sort of came across. This blue piece is representing kind of these like dotted lines, very much like in the back here. We have these dotted lines for these sliding bits. The front also has these sliding bits, and as I was looking at more reference, there are these dotted pieces. So all I did for this was simply grab this guy, duplicate it, and bring it forward. I'm going to quickly at the start of this episode get that more into position and line that up a bit better. We still have this piece from before that I kind of want to get into position as well. And then after trying to figure out how exactly this semicircle was put into place, I noticed that it is attached to some sort of metallic bar that bridges across. So I got that loosely set up in place as well. So let's kind of look at what's going on here. Yeah, if you look at the front here, we have these dots going across. They seem to end pretty early on, so I'm not going to have it go all the way through. So I remember on the back, yeah, they didn't go all the way through either. So I think for this one, just to be safe, what I'm going to do is just have it centered out, since there really wasn't any clear reference as to where exactly it ended. And then I also don't think I need it to be double-sided, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Yeah, so what I'm trying to say here is I'm just going to add a cut here and just sort of like mimic the size of this and chop off the extra. Let's go ahead and fill this hole. And with this done, we can center pivot, freeze transform, delete history, and just try and eyeball this guy, get him into position. Well, actually, since we centered the pivot, it should be pretty easy to snap into the middle. This vertex here should actually be the center. So I can snap that right in there, and that should center this guy out for us, which is great because, wow, this turned out perfect. These sliding bits wouldn't be able to go past this anyways. And this is going directly that far. What I do want to do though is make this a little bit thicker. So dragging that out. And I'm debating if I should weld this to this piece here. Just based on how we'll never really see if these are welded together just because of the angle, on top of the fact that seeing how close these things are together, they might need some more specific smoothing treatment. I'm going to leave it as it is and not weld them together, but I'm glad that we got that there. I'm going to go ahead and change the color back just a standard gray, just to know that we have taken care of that guy. Let's go ahead and move on to this bottom piece. Now this is actually just going to be really simple. We should have actually done this when we were taking care of these parts. It just seemed that these were kind of like taking their own time, or taking their sweet time rather, so I kind of left this for later. But I don't really have any super clear reference on it. But there's kind of this like bar that goes through. This is a good time to bust out the 3D model. But yeah, we have this bar that goes through where the back is attached to it, as well as these sort of like contraptions that are working in tandem with these gears here. So it'll come in handy. We kind of have to have a place to anchor this down to. And it just kind of seems like a rectangular piece with a part extruded so we can attach something to it. And it seems to be just before this sort of like bell shape that we added. Very easy, very simple to sort of wrap our heads around. I'm going to go ahead and put that together now. So I'll delete this. You can just start with the first one. It might be easiest to, snap this here. Pull this back a little bit. Let's go ahead and do an extrusion. So I'm just grabbing the top face, hitting Control E, and bringing this face in a little bit. Just based on how this is set up, it looks like there has to be a gap here to let this contraption in. So I'm going to give it some space on either side, put extrude in, kind of offset it to one side. I don't want it to be so narrow, so I'll bring it in a little bit. And then extrude up. I don't want it to be too tall or anything, but it definitely tapers off near the top. And then I'm going to add in a cut. Skinny it out. Just really quickly softening this guy out. And I do want to weld these two pieces together. So first let's go ahead and fix the coloring on that guy. Welding it should be pretty straightforward because we're just cutting out just these end pieces and sticking them in. But considering just how complex this gigantic piece is, I don't really want to boolean anything. So I'm just going to manually cut them out. So I'm going to isolate these guys. And yeah, just do a manual cut. We've done this technique. Just switching to the cutting tool by pressing Control-Shift-X. And just cutting a box around it. Close that guy off. You can now just delete that face. Vertex snap all these pieces together. And do something very similar on the other side. I might as well actually just collapse these while I'm at it. Yeah, we'll clean this up all later. I just want to make sure it's out of the way. Right. Okay, let's finish this box. Delete the face. And stitch it up. It's just important for this middle piece that's bridging across to be flush. So like this has to be right against this. As long as you have that, it should work fine. We can just do mesh combine. Merge the vertices. Yep, that seems to be it. So that's that piece done. And we have one more that we do have to attach to the main piece, which would be this guy. So let me explain exactly what is going on with this piece here. Like I said, we kind of have this metal bar that's bridging across, and it's connecting this back plate. I'm going to remake it for you guys just because the one I have is just a very simple placeholder, and this is much more detailed, and I kind of want to replicate this look with the bolts and all of that. I'm not entirely sure what it's bolting down, but I'll add those in there, and then if we figure it out, we can always contribute to that later. But yeah, it seems that this part here is this, so it's being screwed directly inside of it. And then we have this version, which is very simplified, but still shows what's going on. Yeah, so let's go ahead and get started on that. So I'm just keeping this reference on the other screen so I can kind of have something to work off of, more or less. And I'm going to keep the blue one just in position so I kind of, I guess, have something to keep the, what am I trying to say? Something to keep the, well, it's acting as a placeholder more than anything, just so I sort of know where to line everything up. So I'm going to drop in a cube. I'm going to start by lining up the back, because it's already in the center. It would probably be the easiest thing to line up. Snapping that back there. Going to scale it in. Let's see. Let's scale this guy out. I'm going to scale it to about where this part is, because that's where it seems to start to turn a little bit. It seems to go a bit lower too. Trying to make this as accurate as possible. This top part is flush with the plate in front. The thickness is definitely a little bit more than what I currently have. Maybe about yay thick. And then we definitely have to make this a bit shorter. Like so, I would say. I might even say it's a bit thinner. It thickens up near the ends though, which is something we can work with. I think for this actually it might just be easier to cut it in half completely and just mirror it over when it's done, because it's in such a tricky angle. I don't kind of want to have to, you know, do everything twice. So let's work on getting this shape. It comes forward. I'm not entirely sure what this hook is. I don't think we have that. Unless it's this piece, but I don't think it is. I think it's something else. I'm going to ignore it for now because we can't really use that as a scale of any kind. I'm going to extrude, so holding shift and then start to lower it a little bit. Going to again extrude forward. And this is where we need to start and curve things. I'm going to extrude from this face. Rather extrude forward. Actually, I'm just going to delete this. I'm trying to get this sort of a cornered edge piece. So what I'm going to do is extrude this way. And then extrude this forward. And from here we can pull this out and kind of angle it. So I can delete that to get that triangular shape. I do think I need to pull this whole part forward and lower, minus these guys, of course, because I just need that to stay in position. But this whole part is pretty chunky, so I'm going to scale that up. Let's go ahead and move our pivot for these guys here, and then try snapping it somewhere like right there. This is obviously a very subtle, or not so subtle turn, so I'm going to add an edge loop here. Pull this out. Maybe even bevel it. Doesn't seem I centered this very well. Let's do something like this. Just trying to make this a little smaller of a triangle, so I'm going to pull this forward. Also going to add on these pieces. Scale this in a little bit. Actually select everything. It's much more like that. I can start to soften these out a little bit. I kind of don't like this shape. Well, obviously that's an error, so I'm going to snap that back. I'm wondering if I should like connect these two. If I did something like that. If I snapped these edges back, it would be a little bit better. But it definitely causes some weird errors. I'm gonna leave it like that. Can always change it later. This edge seems to be pushed up a bit and kind of a bit rounder. So I'm going to bevel that. And then we have a screw in the middle and a screw kind of near the tip. We can go ahead and add those in pretty easily. But I just want to make sure I got this thickness right. Something like that seems a lot more appropriate. I like how that clicks in pretty well. I just don't want this to be so pencil thin, so I'm kind of chunking it up a little bit. Okay. Right, okay, let's get those nails in there now. Going to just select this face, go to this tool, just quickly bring in a cylinder. Let's make it a bit of a bigger one. Put one in the middle here. And based on this, there's another one right about here, kind of evenly spaced out. Go ahead and combine those guys. And go for our Boolean. I'm just freezing transforms in late history. I do that just before every single Boolean, just in case there's any funky information that's going to screw us over. But as long as it's on difference, we're good to hit new Boolean operation. Cleanup, delete history and base objects. Let's just isolate this guy while we do some cleanup. Right, since there's an open hole here, It doesn't like that, and it didn't do a proper boolean. Just sort of like cut the holes in, but that's okay. We can literally just extrude down, shift right click, fill hole, and we have the same thing. I should have just plugged that hole up at the end, but we would have had to delete it again anyways, so it doesn't really matter. I'm gonna go ahead and just sort of vertex snap these pieces back to where they're supposed to be. I don't like having these two edges directly beside each other. This one seems to be fine though. Either way, let's go ahead and merge vertices. And I'm actually going to select these two faces, shift right click poke face, just so I can really quickly duplicate these screws and snap them to the middle. Obviously have to scale this a little bit. Give it a bit of a random rotation. Duplicate, snap. Can make this one maybe even taller. Very subtle differences, I know, but when added up, they all make a difference. I can go ahead and bridge this guy across now. So I'm just moving my pivot to the middle, freezing transforms, and then just hitting this X because we're mirroring across X, as we can see in this bottom little gizmo. We'll merge the vertices on that. Can delete this middle edge loop and just double check that this is all lined up. Seems to be good. Can move our screws over. Just gonna vertex snap that into place. Maybe I'll have that one screwed in super low. Cool, that is that piece done. So we've got 1, 2, 3 very small things put into place. Actually, this piece is gonna have to be welded on. So let's go ahead and do that. Very similar to what we just did for the bottom piece, but we're gonna have to do it for right here, where we're just grabbing our cut tool. And tracing around. This guy here, I'm just gonna snap over. Merge those vertices. Delete this face. Can snap these pieces right to the edges. That one should already be right on it. Let's go to this side. Do the exact same thing. Once again, snap that vert there. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4. Mesh combine. Merge all of our vertices. And there's that. This piece is pretty complex, eh? I think it's looking pretty cool on its own. I like that. A lot of different intricate shapes going on. It's going to look really nice when we slap it into ZBrush. That'll definitely be the first thing that's going in there, because it's kind of the overall cage of everything. But yeah, we got that piece in, we got the screws in. Now we need to start worrying about this guy. Let's see, this piece definitely is on the complex side. We have kind of these different layers. We have these cutouts. I counted on multiple different ones. There's 42 different cuts, and that's relatively easy to do. I don't know if we'll actually get to the cuts in this part, but I'll show you guys how we can do that We're gonna have to use a little bit of math, so bear with me. But the actual shape is pretty simple. It's mostly just trying to figure out why all these bolts are here. Like these bolts, for example, we know like these flappy bits are being bolted down. These bolts are because we have the this string piece going across. But these ones, I'm not too sure. I think, like, I kind of want to say that these bolts are like this plate, and like the reason that this is 3 different kind of like crescent moons is because this is being bolted to this one in the back, and then this part is wrapping around the back and being bolted through. So I think it's like a very layered system. That's the only reason I can think that it would be set up that way. But at the same time, I don't really have any proof for something like that, other than how there's just like different thicknesses. Like it's too muddy to see what's going on in the back, unless I can just find a reference really quickly. But it almost kind of seems like this is resting on top of this, and then it like wraps around and is being bolted through. And I think that's just kind of how we'll set it up. Either way, even if that's completely wrong, it's not like you can really see the back of it too well once we have all the different keys in there. And if you can, it's still good detail at the very least. So let's get the basics of that set up. Who knows, maybe we will get that all done in this part. Either way, I just need to quickly have a drink. Okay, and let's continue on. So this shape, just so we're on the same page as to how I got it, I pretty much just took a circle, I crushed it in a little bit, like I scaled it in a little bit. Just wanted to make sure it mostly mimicked this cutout we already have, but I also went to View, Import Image Plane, Import Image, and I put an image of this piece specifically in the background and sort of like scaled the shape to it. That might mean that this shape we might have to do a little bit of finessing with. In fact, let's do that right now, because I think these two should obviously be in unison with one another. So if I scale this in, yeah, I think that's all I really have to do is scale it in. So I want the shape to kind of be hugging it, or I could take this and scale this out. So my two options. We could look at reference and see which one seems more appropriate, and I'm really feeling this being scaled in seems a little bit better. Like, doesn't really seem like that much has changed. We have what seems to be an appropriate amount of space on each side. Let me get like a front-on shot. Oh yeah, there's definitely plenty of space because it has this kind of like cut-in pattern, so it's almost as if you did something like obviously that's very, very wrong, but it seems like it even has that kind of like trim to it. So, excuse me. I think that works. Let's undo all of that, and let's continue along with the way that we have it. This obviously has 2 little edges. There's a few ways we could fix that. First one would be to just select all these edges, bevel them. Obviously that doesn't work very well, so what we're going to do is probably just make a new one and mimic the shape of it. Let's isolate this guy. Create polygon primitives, cylinder. Going to just snap that to the vertice. Holding J, I can rotate that and make sure it's exactly 90 degrees. And hopefully this doesn't mess this part up. Okay, good. I'm going to, since this is kind of like the middle of everything and the focal point, let's give this guy a lot of subdivs, like 60. Because this is more or less the center of everything, and we're also going to have to mess with the shape a bit. I'm going to scale it up so the bottom is level, and then just sort of chop off these top parts that we don't need. Let's go ahead and just fill this hole and scale it out to be the right size. Take these verts, snap them in. Control-Shift-I will invert the selection so we have everything else, and we can just snap those guys in. Sweet, so now we have our middle disk here. Yeah, that seems about right. I was going to say that it kind of seems like off at the edges, but I think it's just because it bevels and curves up at the end. So I'm going to try and set that up. Or just grab these edges and hit Control B. It adds a lot to the silhouette. I'm also going to isolate it again because we should probably bridge those guys across. We have that as proper geo. But let's say, yeah, these are all different layers. We're going to have to split them up into the different layers. And what is the best way to go about that? We can't simply add a edge loop. When things are sort of put to this point, it doesn't like that very much. I'm trying to think of a smart way to do this. Like if I hit Control E and offset, it'll let us cut in. So that could be an option if we select all of these. Let's isolate this guy just for now so we have an easier way of working with him. I'm even going to close off these improper pieces. Just grabbing the verts, connecting them to the middle. Like so. But yeah, let's give this a shot where we select all the front faces. We're gonna have to do this the old-fashioned manual way. Let's just go for a Control E. It's on offset. I'm just gonna I guess I'll leave it like so, and then just merge these vertices to the center. Do the same there. Could even merge these verts up. So now we have like an inner line that we can work with. If we move the pivot here, I think when we scale it should be even. Right, okay, so we got something pretty nice set up. Let's see, what's the best way to go about this? Probably to cut out this inner layer first. The smallest one, the thickest one is about this big. The smallest piece is about yay big. I'll go with that for now. I think what I'm also going to do is delete the back. It's just going to get in the way, at least for now. Let's go ahead and add cuts all the way to the top. For now, I'm going to have them be level, and then when I have both of them able to be selected, I'm going to extend them out a little bit like so. So this is our first layer. I can shift right click, go to extract faces. So these are on their own now. With these guys, we want to get this outer rim now. So for that, Seems to be about that thick. It seems bigger, but that's, I think, because they're going to be like physically extruded. But maybe not. I think the small part is definitely too large. So like before, I'm going to move the pivot for the selection in. Kind of want it to be wider. Something kind of like that. Nice. Okay. Seems to be about right. Let's extrude those again. Or extract, rather. Let's try getting an appropriate size. Let's just do it in the middle. That seems about right. I might even say, screw it. Let's make it a little bit bigger than the middle. Not by a lot, but something like that. And this one seems big, but I think once we cover it with this large piece, it'll seem a lot smaller. We're just gonna have to do a little bit of manual cleanup. Let's just make it all 50%, which looks super wonky, but you'll see why I'm gonna do this in a second. I'm just holding shift, of course, while I'm cutting along. So I can now just select both sides, scale in. I could actually just, now that I think about it, just snap these in. Merge vertices, and then with these guys, scale them out a bit. But yeah, I'll just do something like that. It's probably infinitely easier. Just snap it in. But anyways, that means I can now select all these outer guys, hit extract faces. We have our 3 different layers. So go ahead and center, pivot, freeze, transform, select history on all of them. And we haven't done it yet, so let's go ahead and save. I think this is a very good part to save in the process. I think for this, we should probably layer them properly, and that'll probably do it for this chapter, or this part of the chapter. The next one will do the cuts and set up the connections. I think it's a pretty natural place to sort of pause everything. So right, let's set up the layers and the thickness and how I sort of want to go about all of that. I think this piece here is going to be properly like faceted to the back. So let's start with the thickness on this. I'm going to extrude forward a little bit, or rather extrude backwards. Seems all these faces are inverted, so let's go ahead and invert. But essentially I want to take these guys, just make sure I have them all selected. I'm going to take them all and snap them back here because it's going to be bolted down for sure. So this guy's mostly just kind of like set up in that way. I do want the front though to be a little bit thinner because it seems like everything is sort of pushed forward from it. So let's just go ahead and select all these pieces. We'll leave it like that for now. Obviously we have these pieces that are going to be bolted in. This itself is going to be bolted in. Let's not worry about that too much right now. With this piece, let's just give it some basic thickness first. So we have to invert those faces since they were incorrect. But let's, yeah, move the pivot here, snap it back. scale it in a little bit. It does have this rim, which we can go ahead and put in, but it's very shallow. That's why I kind of set it up that way. So we can just add a cut like so, and then manually complete the top. Once again, I'm just going to drag that down. Let's go ahead and merge. And then these aren't perfect, so I'm going to snap them to be directly above. Shift select both of them and now scale them out so I know that they're perfectly even on both sides. We can select these guys, extrude them forward to get this sort of shape. Actually, I might actually extrude with the Control E so I can get thickness. It kind of seems like there's a tiny, tiny offset on them as well. So I want to have like a 0.01. Maybe like a 0.05. Something akin to that maybe. Not liking these edges though. Maybe it is extruded out normally and then just like the end on this side is beveled. Something more along these lines. I'll go ahead and clean this up a little bit. Just going to close it off so it's more contained. And then I guess we don't really need this edge loop at all, do we? Okay, let's get rid of that. Just close that off as well. Close that off, and then yeah, let's try and just delete that. Nice. And that leaves this big piece. Let's go for our normal extrusion back. Make sure we select all the ones that are black. We can go ahead and invert those. Okay. We can snap this all the way back as well. It might be a little bit thick, so I'm going to thin it out. But it also seems like the edges are all beveled pretty clearly. So let's go ahead and select all the edges. And try and bevel them. Something along these lines. So then we have all of our cuts along there. Bolt, cut, big metal plate. I think it's something just about the overall shape is throwing me off a little bit. I kind of want to, let's try and put these in a group. And I kind of, yeah, I like it when it's a bit tighter like that. I just kind of scaled it in a little bit. For some reason, I just kind of like the sharpness of it a little bit more. It's definitely spread a bit too thin. But right, as I was saying before, I was imagining that these sort of like wrap around the back in some way. I'm not quite sure the best way to represent that. Perhaps if this sort of like extruded out a bit more. Just some more layering to it, but that would also mean that this would need to extrude back more as well, and the middle one would just sort of be like attached to the two. It'll make more sense when I start positioning it in just a second. So let me extrude that out, snap that to the back, and then with this guy I can move the pivot to something against the end, snap it there, move the pivot of this guy to something along the end, snap it there. So now this guy and this guy, as we can see, can still be bolted to the bar, and this piece can be bolted to something else, which in this case we can make the other pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and move this guy forward a little bit, and let's see, it seems to be bolted roughly here and roughly here. I can just say have like this half and this half. Like this isn't perfect, I know, but if I extrude it in something along these lines, and then the bolts will go through them. So they're attached, but separate pieces, but it adds more visual interest to them. It gives a reason for the bolts to be there. I kind of like that idea. Just to make sure that I have this completely symmetrical, going to delete half. And let's see. It doesn't have to be super precise. I'm just trying to eyeball where these bolts are. I would imagine it's somewhere along here. So let's try and like extrude from this point. Thickness, it's not a super perfect match. It's pretty close. Definitely pretty close. Let's go ahead and isolate these pieces and see if we can connect them up. Let's get rid of this. Actually, let's keep it for now. It seems to be helping. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. Just snapping these into their associated position. Which I guess means that these have to be the same piece. Merge vertices. To cut this guy in half as well. Put the pivot back in the middle. Freeze transform, select history, mirror by X. Merge vertices. This guy can get bolted through to the other end. Yeah, pretty happy with how that turned out. And I'm liking the look of that. I like how these are definitely broken up, seem like their own independent pieces, but layered. We might as well get the booleans done in this part. I just kind of want to mess with this a little bit more. Something about this seems like it's at a weird angle, so I'm going to add cuts into the middle. kind of want it to like curve in almost. Super subtle, but I think it works. Let's go ahead and work on getting those booleans. So first of all, create polygon primitives cylinder. Since it's based on the back, let's snap this to the middle. Might as well just delete half again. No point doing it twice. Same with this, I suppose. Since there's a giant opening, it's not going to be a perfect Boolean, but we can at least work with it. The reference has it a bit lower in the corner, so let's try and get it to be like that. Okay, let's start with this one. Freeze transforms, delete history. I'm also going to duplicate a copy and put it up there. So click, shift click, new Boolean, clean up, delete history and base objects. This guy, since we moved him up after freezing transforms, we can just change this back to 0 and I'll put it back in the right spot. We can do the same here. Delete history and base objects. A little bit of cleanup is needed. Just bridge these guys across. A couple edges need to be relined up. Same thing for the middle piece. Seems like the middle piece has a lot more weird stuff going on, but nevertheless, not that bad. From here, super easy. We're just going to mirror everything over. Of course, along X. Can merge the verts. And then same with this guy. Merge the vertices. Nice, we have it going through. Let's go ahead and plug it up with some bolts. We might be able to actually finish off more of this part than I thought in this little section. Let's go ahead and vertex snap here and vertex snap here so we know he's centered. Scale it, or rotate it rather. Now we scale it. And then for the other end, I'm just going to rotate this guy around. Doesn't make perfect sense, but people won't be able to see both sides at once, so I'm just going to go and try and get away with it. Nice, we got that part done. We can cut a hole in the middle, and it seems like there's two little holes. Oh, these are plugged in with screws. Are these all screws? I'm not entirely sure. Seems like these two screws could be even like attached to the main bar as like reinforcement. And then the one in the middle, I'm not entirely sure. It honestly seems more like a hole. And then there's this tab thing that's poking through, and all these lines, which we should probably incorporate. I'd say for this part, I'm going to bolt these down, and then I think I'm just going to call it a part. We can regather after I take a little break and I kind of figure out exactly what's going on, but let's go ahead and do that. We'll bolt these top pieces down. Very, very similar to what we just did, where we just going to isolate these pieces. Create polygon primitives, cylinder. Yeah, where I just put a cylinder in place and kind of cut through. Just gotta make sure it's not going out of the range of this, but this seems to be fine. Let's only do half of it again just to save some time. Click, shift click, new boolean, delete history and base objects. Let's just extrude this back, shift right click, fill hole. A little bit of cleanup. Maybe a lot of cleanup. Borrow one of these guys. Seems to be a little bit smaller, but that should be okay. It's totally realistic. And then of course, there's always the need to mirror it back over. Dupe this guy over. I think that'll do it for this specific part. I feel like this was a little bit shorter. No, we're right about on an hour. So this is kind of standard length. Yeah, the next part, cut, multiple cuts, and we'll finish off these pieces up here. Shouldn't take too long, but I definitely want to just look into it a little bit more. But yeah, that seems to be a wrap here. We got a decent amount done with this piece, getting some new, what did I hit? With this piece, getting some new sort of like middle section attachments. And of course, this sort of main focal piece beginning to take shape. Kind of actually looks like a typewriter now. So yeah, happy with all that. And it's coming along pretty nice. Thank you guys for watching this part. We'll wrap up this thing that we started in the next one, and then we're, yeah, moving on to the keyboard. So sweet. I'll catch you guys in the next video. See ya.